Sarah's eyes blinked as she squinted at her laptop screen, scanning the email subject line that read, Point Pleasant's Hidden Truth. Her finger hovered over the delete button. It was probably another scam, or worse, a virus. But something stopped her. A magnetic curiosity that she couldn't resist. Just one click won't hurt, she thought. The message was short, but potent. Something watches over Point Pleasant. Shadows conceal more than the darkness here. If you're brave enough, dig deep, but be warned. Some truths are best left buried. Sarah sighed. She was a journalism student, always on the prowl for a unique story that could propel her career. Could this be it? Her rational mind protested, screaming it was a bad idea. Yet the allure was irresistible. Guess it's time for a road trip, she mumbled, closing her laptop. After a 4-hour drive filled with conflicting thoughts and a playlist of her favorite rock songs, Sarah arrived in Point Pleasant as the sky wore shades of twilight. A fading billboard welcomed her. Point Pleasant, a beautiful place where rivers meet. The words beautiful and meet had been vandalized, now reading, a bitter place where rivers weep. She felt an odd mix of anticipation and dread as she drove through the empty streets. Homes were tidy, lawns well manicured, but the windows were tightly shut and the curtains drawn. It was as if the entire town was holding its breath. Why do I feel like I'm not welcome here? Sarah pulled into the library's small parking lot and was greeted by the sole occupant of the building, a middle-aged man whose name tag read Tom, who seemed friendly enough. "Evening, miss. Looking for something?" he asked, a polite smile on his face. "Newspaper archives. Specifically anything unusual or unexplained," Sarah replied. Tom hesitated for a moment, his smile faltering. "Unusual, you say? Follow me." He led her to a dimly lit corner filled with old newspapers and discolored microfilms. With reluctance, he pointed to a cabinet. "You might find what you're looking for in there." He knows something. Sarah spent hours sifting through yellowing pages and unsettling local stories. But what caught her eye was a story dated back to 1967. Unexplained disappearance stirs local fears. The article was about a man who went missing in the nearby forest. The last line read, "Residents advised to avoid the woods after dark." A chill crawled up her spine. This was it. This was her story. She had to find out more. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her voice quivering with a mix of excitement and fear. "I think I found what I needed." Tom nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "Be careful out there. The forest isn't kind to strangers, especially when the sun goes down." Ignoring the knot in her stomach, Sarah drove towards the forest. The sun had already set, and the moon was conspicuously absent, as if hiding from something sinister. She parked her car near the entrance to the wooded area, her headlights slicing through the inky blackness. It's now or never, she thought. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car. The air was thick with the scent of damp soil and decaying leaves. Crickets sang an eerie lullaby as she walked deeper into the gloom, armed with only her phone's flashlight. Just when she started doubting her decision, questioning her sanity, she heard it, a guttural shrieking sound that pierced the air. It was unlike anything she'd ever heard. Her heart pounded in her chest as she aimed the flashlight in the direction of the sound. For a split second, she saw them. Two glowing red eyes in the dark, perched atop a shadowy figure with what looked like wings. Then, as quickly as they appeared, they vanished, leaving Sarah standing alone in the engulfing darkness. Sarah's breaths came in short, shallow gasps as she scrambled back to her car, her mind swirling with the impossible image she'd just witnessed. The red eyes, the shadowy wings. What had she just seen? "You're losing it, Sarah," she thought, fumbling with her car keys. But she knew she wasn't. The terror she felt was real. as real as the chill that seemed to have seeped into her very bones. She revved the engine and sped back to Point Pleasant, her headlights cutting through the night like twin beams of rationality, as if they could light the way to a sensible explanation for all of this. She reached the library, which, to her surprise, was still open. Tom looked up as she burst through the door, his eyes widening at the sight of her disheveled appearance. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern lining his features. "No," Sarah replied, her voice shaking. "I saw something out there. In the forest." Tom sighed, his shoulders sagging as if carrying the weight of a long-held secret. "I was hoping you'd turn back, that you'd lose interest. But I see that's not the case." "Tell me what's going on," she demanded. "Tell me about the Mothman." Tom's eyes darted around the room as if afraid the very walls would overhear. Finally, he spoke. It's not something we talk about openly, but since you've seen it, you have a right to know." He led her to a secluded section of the library, away from any windows, and began recounting the town's haunted history. "The Mothman," he began cautiously, "is more than just a myth around these parts. It's a part of us. A dark omen that precedes tragedy. The Silver Bridge collapse in 167, industrial accidents, and now, it seems, your arrival." Sarah's mind reeled at the implications. "Are you saying the Mothman causes these tragedies?" "No," Tom clarified. "It doesn't cause them. It warns us about them. But knowing the warning doesn't necessarily mean we can prevent what's coming." Just then, the radio behind the library counter crackled to life, interrupting their tense conversation. "We're getting reports of an accident at the Thompson Chemical Factory uptown. Luckily, there are no casualties, but the residents are advised to stay indoors due to the risk of chemical fumes." The blood drained from Sarah's face. "This can't be a coincidence." "No, it's not," Tom agreed solemnly. "And it means something worse is coming. Something much worse." Fueled by a newfound resolve, Sarah stood up. "Then I need to find out what that is, and the only way to do that is to capture evidence of the Mothman. I need photos, videos, something undeniable." Tom hesitated, then nodded. "All right. There's an old pawn shop near the river. You might find something useful there." Sarah thanked him and left, her mind abuzz with both dread and determination. She would uncover the truth, no matter what it took. As she wandered through the cluttered aisles of the pawn shop, her eyes fell on an old yet sophisticated camera with a powerful telephoto lens. She felt drawn to it, as if it was calling out to her. After a brief haggle with the shopkeeper, she left with the camera slung around her neck, eager to test it. Once outside, she pointed the camera at the horizon, where the last hints of twilight merged with the onset of night. She snapped a picture, the camera's shutter capturing the dying light. But when she looked at the photo, her heart skipped a beat. There, at the corner of the frame, was a blurred but unmistakable shape. A shadowy figure with wings, soaring against the backdrop of the darkening sky. Sarah couldn't believe what she was seeing. The photo, blurry, indistinct, but unquestionably eerie, seemed to taunt her, testing the limits of her rational mind. The shadowy figure with wings, faintly visible in the dying light, was an omen she couldn't ignore. This is real. It's all terrifyingly real. She returned to her car, the weight of the camera and the gravity of her mission settling in like a storm cloud. Driving back to her rented room, her thoughts teetered between scientific curiosity and primal fear. The room she'd booked at a local inn felt cold and unwelcoming as she entered, her footsteps heavy against the creaking wooden floor. She set up her camera and laptop on a small table by the window, intent on transferring and examining the photos. Let's see if we can't uncover some truth. As she waited for the images to load, Sarah took a moment to scroll through her phone, only to find a flurry of text messages from an unknown number. Leave. Stop. Danger. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering on the table. She took a shaky breath, trying to collect her thoughts. Is it a warning or a threat? Just then, her laptop pinged, indicating the photos had transferred successfully. Sarah hesitated for a moment before clicking on the image folder. What she saw made her gasp out loud. In addition to the dark figure she'd already noticed, upon closer examination, she found symbols etched onto the wings. Symbols that looked like archaic runes or some form of cryptic language. A sudden realization dawned upon her. The Mothman wasn't just an omen, it was a messenger, and the message was etched onto its wings. Desperate for answers, Sarah decided to go back to the library. She needed to consult more records, look for instances of similar symbols, and maybe find any historical background that could shed light on the Mothman's message. The library was her best shot at uncovering this town's dark secrets. Before she could fully process the implications, a deafening screech resonated through the church, echoing off the crumbling walls. Sarah spun around, her heart pounding. And there, at the back of the church, bathed in the ethereal glow of the moonlight streaming through a broken window, stood the Mothman. Its eyes, glowing a fiery red, locked onto hers. And for the briefest of moments, the boundaries between fear and understanding, between the human and the unfathomable, seemed to blur and fade. Sarah raised her camera and took the shot. The air in the church was thick with a palpable tension, as if the very atmosphere had frozen in a moment of cosmic significance. Sarah's finger quivered over the camera shutter button, her gaze locked with the Mothman's glowing eyes. For a fraction of an instant, a conduit seemed to open between them, a bridge across which flowed a torrent of incomprehensible emotions and revelations. It knows me, and in a way, I know it. The camera beeped softly, signaling that the photograph had been taken. As quickly as it had appeared, the Mothman unfurled its dark wings and soared through the broken window, vanishing into the night sky. The creature left behind a wake of disturbed air like a sigh exhaled from the depths of time. Sarah couldn't remain still. Her instinct screamed at her to flee, but her curiosity rooted her to the spot. Her gaze fell back to the mosaic on the floor. The symbols, those cryptic markers that seemed to be a part of a greater cosmic diagram, seemed to shimmer slightly under the flashlight's beam, as if resonating with the events that had just unfolded. Could it be that this place is the epicenter of whatever cataclysm the Mothman's warning foretells? Driven by a newfound determination, Sarah began to meticulously photograph the mosaic. Perhaps the key to decoding its message lay in the arrangement of the symbols. With every click of the camera, she felt as if she were peeling back layers of a long-concealed truth, inching ever closer to the eye of a metaphysical storm. Having captured every angle, she retreated from the church, her mind a whirling cacophony of questions and revelations. She returned to her rented room, where she immediately set about the task of analyzing the new photographs. Hours blurred into a seemingly timeless void as she compared the images of the mosaic with those of the Mothman, her eyes scanning for recurring patterns, alignments, or any other details that might reveal the prophecy's meaning. It was during this almost trance-like state that she stumbled upon it, a configuration of symbols that, when overlaid upon a map of Point Pleasant, aligned perfectly with key landmarks, including the abandoned church, the library, and even the Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge. Of course. Sarah felt a wave of realization wash over her. The catastrophic event the Mothman portended was tied to the bridge. A structure integral to the town's geography and its people. A sense of urgency gripped her. If her deductions were accurate, the clock was ticking, and she had little time to prevent an impending tragedy. The drive to the Silver Bridge felt like an eternity. Her car screeched to a halt at the entrance, and she burst out, her eyes immediately scanning the structure. Everything appeared normal, but appearances could be insidiously deceptive. Armed with her camera, she began to inspect the bridge meticulously, her gaze narrowing on anything that seemed out of the ordinary. As she reached the midpoint of the bridge, her flashlight beam fell upon something unsettling. a hairline fracture on one of the support beams. Almost imperceptible, but irrefutably there. This is it. This is the fulcrum upon which fate teeters. Sarah felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out, her eyes widening as she read the message from an unknown number. Now. Just as her fingers began to dial 911, a resounding screech filled the air. Sarah looked up, her heart in her throat, to see the Mothman circling above the bridge. It let out another cry, a sonorous lament that reverberated through the steel and concrete, and then swooped down, its wings brushing against the fractured support beam. The resulting reverberations were immediate. The crack widened, the structure groaned, and Sarah knew she was out of time. She screamed into her phone, urging the authorities to shut down the bridge immediately, her voice tinged with an uncharacteristic hysteria. It was a night that Point Pleasant would never forget. Sirens wailed, lights flashed, and the townspeople watched in awe and horror as the silver bridge was cordoned off, just minutes before a catastrophic collapse could occur. Sarah stood among the crowd, her eyes meeting Tom's, who had also arrived at the scene. No words were needed. Their expressions spoke volumes. As emergency crews began the work of reinforcing the weakened structure, Sarah felt a shadow pass overhead. She looked up to see the Mothman, its form silhouetted against the moon. Their eyes met one final time, and then it ascended, climbing higher and higher until it was swallowed by the night sky, its prophetic mission fulfilled. In the days that followed, Sarah's photographs would be analyzed, dissected, and debated by experts and skeptics alike. Many would question their authenticity, while others would view them as incontrovertible proof of the inexplicable. But to the people of Point Pleasant, and to Sarah herself, the experience had etched itself into the very fabric of their reality, a testament to the fragile boundary between the mundane and the mystical. Some will say it's a myth, some will say it's science unexplained. But for me, it's a chapter closed, yet a story that will never truly end.